Okay, but first, the new mining tax. So in 2008, 2009, the Rudd government, you may remember Kevin, he commissioned a wholesale review of the income tax laws in Australia by Ken Henry. So Ken Henry was a former treasurer, former very important public servant in Australia, the most senior and well-respected public servant in Australia. And so he got given this job by Kevin Rudd. And so the Henry Review, as it came to be called, came back with all these really sort of courageous, and I call them innovative and wide-ranging reforms to the tax system. And of course, what does politics do with courageous, wide-ranging, and innovative things? It kills them. No one in politics actually wants anything courageous. That's like being told, this bill of yours or this proposal of yours is really brave. That's a really brave assignment you chose to take, right? What is that sign of when someone calls you, say, your topic choice brave? They think it's suicidal. They think, this is insane. Why are you taking this? This is a really brave choice. Meaning you're most likely going to fail. Politics is not about the brave. It's not about the courageous, and particularly not nowadays. It's about the safe and the winning votes and whatever makes people happy. So whenever you change the tax system, you are going to piss at least one person off. Guaranteed. Right? If you take away a tax break, that person, all of the people who have that tax break will be very annoyed. If you put in a new tax break, all the people who just were on the edge of the line that didn't get into that tax break, they will. So the taxes are always about pissing somebody off somewhere in Australia. Modern politicians don't believe in that. So what, of course, they did was they just deep-sixed Ken Henry's review and basically was never seen from again. But, you know, this was the genius of Kevin Rudd, the Mr., the apology and everything else. And the, was it 2012, he had sort of committee meetings about 2020, what we wanted to achieve. Kevin was all about style. So Kevin was about putting things up the front, but then when it became too difficult, he was about burying things. So one of the things, and one of the few things that actually came out of the Henry Review that actually was kind of courageous, was the resource super profits tax. And that was one of the few things that actually did make it into reality. And of course, that was one of the things that caused Kevin Rudd to lose his job. So he was right. He was probably right to oppose every single thing in the Henry Review. His mistake was probably to allow the one thing to actually go through, because he wound up pissing off the mining companies who helped to kick him out. So the resource super profits tax, this was like I said, it's a small part of his envisaged much larger change to our tax system. It was going to be about changing welfare benefits and marginal tax rates down at the bottom and minimum tax, minimum incomes and all these things that were going to come in. But of course, all those things were way too difficult, and no one wants to deal with those things, right? So all this other stuff just got forgotten, the really important part. And one of the minor bits was this resource super profit tax. That's one thing they did take. So the idea was that this RSPT was going to change taxes around mining to give a larger share of mining company profits to taxpayers. That seems like a pretty easy political sell, right? Big, rich mining companies, tiny, suffering Australian taxpayers. Okay, the claim in the Henry Review was that Australian taxpayers, in a sense, got too little of the value of the stuff that we dug up out. So that was essentially the base argument, that all these mining companies are making a lot of money right now in a minerals boom because they're digging stuff up out of Australia's backyard. And the idea was that the Australian taxpayers weren't getting as much benefit as they could have from this mining. Okay, so what does that mean? So here's a little chart that was in the Henry Review. So this is their sales pitch, right? So this was in their amalgamated report. So this means this is what they thought was a very effective public relations strategy. So what we see here, the green bars are mining company profits. So you can see that mining company profits went from about $10 billion a year in 2001-2002 up to $65 billion a year in 2008-2009. Right? So mining company profits went up by a factor of 6. What happened to tax revenue? Well, tax revenues here are the black line. So how much did tax revenues increase when mining company profits went up by a factor of 6? The answer is they went up from about $4 or $5 billion per year up to about $12 billion. So this is a key statistic there. Basically arguing that Australian taxpayers aren't making as much money as shareholders are. So Rio Tinto and BHP and Xstrata, Newcrest, they're making an awful lot of money, all the shareholders in those companies, and the Australian taxpayers seemingly making very little. The light green wobbly line in there is actually kind of a share. So it's saying what share of total profits of mining companies do the Australian shareholders get? The answer was towards the end, as profits go up, the Australian tax holders actually get very little. So why is this? Well, the answer is it's simple, that the taxes that we tend to have on mining companies are things like dollars per ton. So whenever you export copper dig up copper from the back of Australia, or coal, and you put it on a ship and you send it off to China, you have to pay so and so many dollars per ton when you send it out to Australian ports. Now, so a tax like that, say $10 a ton, that may sound like a really good deal for Australian taxpayers when, copper prices are maybe $20. But when copper prices go up to $80 a ton, it doesn't seem like a very good share for the Australians. And that's effectively what you've got here. If you've got a tax on it's a tax on production of these companies at a pretty low rate. Now, that's a nice thing when minerals prices are low. So in bust times, when coal's not doing very well, those taxes look good because at least you're getting some, and mining company profits aren't very high. But when there's a big mining boom, like there is right now, and prices of coal and iron ore and everything else go up, those fixed dollar amounts don't change. And so all of a sudden, what looked like a great revenue structure in 2001, 2002, right? Looking there, the Australian taxpayers get $4 billion a year. Mining companies get $12 billion a year. Seems like a relatively reasonable way to break things up. 2008, 2009, Australian taxpayers are getting $8 billion a year, and mining companies are getting, $12 billion a year, I'm looking at the wrong, and mining companies are getting 65. So it doesn't seem like too hard a deal under those circumstances. So the Henry Review said, well, let's change the laws. Let's shift this thing. So instead of getting fixed dollar amounts per ton, Australian taxpayers get a percentage of profits. So that would be a straight line here. That would effectively say, in this case, the Henry Review asked for 40%. The Henry Review said, well, basically, the Australian taxpayers should get 40 cents on the dollar of mining company profits. So in this case, 40% is kind of like 2001, 2002. But when we get to 2008, 2009, we'll be talking about the Australian taxpayer getting something like $30 billion rather than 12. So that was the pitch. So what's the argument in a broader sense? Well, the mining companies are generating enormous profits for shareholders. Now, if we're going to take sort of a nationalistic sense, we might say we care more about Australians than we do about other people. Shareholders, who are they? Well, some shareholders are Australian, right? Some of the largest shareholders in our mining companies are, in fact, who? Who are some of the largest shareholders? Unions, through pension funds, super funds. Union super funds are one of the largest holders of BHP revenues. And whenever the mining companies complain and bitch about BHP operations, it's amusing because it's actually them benefiting from, awful behavior by the mining companies. The unions are getting paid the salaries, but then they're also getting a share of the profits. And so in a sense, they're also benefiting from whatever it is the unions are digging up and selling overseas. Sorry, whatever the mines are digging up and selling overseas. So Australian taxpayers are only getting, say, 10 cents on the dollar for the value of stuff that's being dug up in the backyard. So we might say, well, we only care about Australians. So while some Australians benefit from what mining companies do, other shareholders overseas also benefit. And that money disappears if you're an Australian. It's going overseas, not to Australian shareholders. So, well, these minerals, they're an asset. They belong to Australian taxpayers. We're allowing these companies to come in and make money by digging them up and selling them. So we should have some sort of say, you might say, about who's going to get the profits of that. So the mining companies are saying, well, look, we're benefiting all of our shareholders by doing this. And Australian taxpayers might say, well, actually, what we want is we want a better share. That's effectively what this resource super profits tax was the Australian shareholders demanding a higher share of mining company profits. I mean, one reason you might defend this is you might say, well, look, this is an asset of the Australian taxpayers. If we allow mining companies to come up and dig them up, yeah, there's going to be lots of salaries for Australian miners. That's going to be lots of money going to union super funds and other shareholders in Australia. But also, in a sense, there's going to be an awful lot of money flowing out of Australia. And that money that's flowing out of Australia isn't doing things that it could be doing if it was used, if it was collected instead as taxes. If we collected that money as taxes, we could build roads and bridges, we could build schools and hospitals, things like that. And those roads and bridges will still be around in 20 years' time when the next generation of Australians comes of age. And the next generation of Australians says, hey, you guys, you dug up all the stuff in our backyard and you allowed those mining companies to sell it overseas, and what have we got? You dug it up so there's nothing left for us to dig up. And you sold it overseas and you didn't collect anything in taxes, you didn't build any hospitals. So now we don't have anything in the backyard because it's all been dug up. And you didn't build any roads or bridges for us. So all we've got is a great big hole in the ground. So that might be one sort of intergenerational equity. You're arguing that tomorrow's citizens deserve to benefit from the minerals just like today's citizens do. And if we dig them up and we allow other companies to profit and take that money overseas rather than spending it at home, then we'll be, in a sense, impoverishing future generations of Australians. So that might be one argument you make about resource rent tax. But either way, you're going to argue that we want to higher mining taxes.